It's interesting too, because when someday when somebody's writing the history of this period of legal education, generative AI sort of came on the heels of a lot of schools starting to step back from the US News rankings, for all the reasons that you suggested, as well as reasons, that don't prioritize the ability to be more inclusive in recruiting student body. So we're sort of in an era where the US News rankings are already susceptible to being less important. My suspicion, and I'm guessing this, but it's also informed by a couple conversations I've had with prospective law students, is that because there's currently not another framework to use to select law schools, is that prospects continue to use the US News rankings right now to make decisions. So I wonder, whether you would have advice for people thinking about going to law school about why they should move beyond the rankings and what they should actually be looking for in their law schools.
Yeah, I think this is such a great question, and to the extent people out there listen to this at all, I do think this is a really important moment to look far beyond both the rankings and even the marketing materials that schools are producing about what their curriculum does and doesn't do. I mean, well, does do. There aren't that many marketing materials on what they don't do, but that would be kind of cool, actually. We're not good at that. So if you want to do that, go to that over law school. Um, I can do those materials, by the way, for a lot of schools.
That
I
would
have
be fun.
I have this in my head. We should do this. But I think you want to actually, ask questions of figure out who the right person is. Probably somebody who's an administrator, not necessarily a faculty member. Faculty members tend to be focused on their research and their own teaching, and especially during the semester, I think it's hard for them to have a sense of what else is happening in the law school, in and around the law school. So I think you might want to find the administrator whose job it is to help you think through this important question and ask these very specific questions about how they're approaching learning, professional development, and the changing profession as a result of generative AI. I would want I would have my list of questions about this topic ready to go, and I'd go find a person and ask them. You don't have to go physically; you can call them, you can Zoom them, but I would want to ask those questions. But yeah, what do you think? Well, what do you tell? You must have people asking you this already. Do you have advice?
Yeah, I mean, most relevantly, my stepdaughter thinks about going to law school, so I talk with her a lot. And just because of the roles I've had, I have people connect prospective students to me. Some of my advice is exactly the same as it would have been 5 or 10 years ago, which is if you're just graduating undergrad, I definitely recommend taking a couple years to work to figure out what you actually enjoy doing, and whether that aligns with what lawyers actually do on the ground day to day. I think to the credit of law schools, they have done a good job in the last 10 years of really looking for students who have prior work experience to make sure that they are really attending law school for thoughtful reasons and informed by professional experience. So I do think that's a good change. But I think the additional piece here is not only learning about yourself and what you like, but seeing how things unfold in the next few years in the profession and what the life of a lawyer looks like 3 to 5 years from now, and whether that is something that you're really interested in pursuing. And then to your point, I think really interrogating the offerings of around generative AI and technology generally. One thing we didn't really talk about on the description of law school education is because of the centrality of critical thinking and understanding the substance of the law. In many cases, law schools are not as focused on thinking about how technology is integrated into practice to do things beyond those core sort of thinking like a lawyer, critical thought, legal research and writing aspects of it. So I would want to know, what is the history of your school in terms of thinking about technology as part of preparation for being a lawyer? Is that integrated into the core curriculum, or are they only electives that are offered? Do you have tenured faculty members who focus on not just the substance of technology law, but actually how to use technology in practice? And then I think you just said something that made me think of another piece, which is like the metacognition and lifelong learning piece is the world is changing too quickly to have 3 static years of your life prepare you for the rest of your profession. So, how does your school help me understand how I learn as a lawyer and what skills I'll need to upskill myself beyond CLE every year in a rapidly changing world? And I'd be really curious actually to know the answers from some schools on that last piece, because it's a lot harder to sort of conceptualize and communicate and integrate into curriculum.
That's super helpful. While you were talking, I was thinking like, yeah, some of the things I would want to learn right now are sort of leadership, change management, creativity and collaborative work arrangements with unusual partners. And like, I don't, those are things that are, they're not in the traditional curriculum, at law schools. There are some law schools that teach a leadership course. In fact, our friend Jim Sandman teaches one at Penn, which is an amazing course, I think. But there are some human skills that have become more important, and I'd want to have some sense of how the law school at least thinks about those skills and values them, and thinks that they are teaching them. I'm not saying you can't teach them within some of the traditional curriculum. I think you can. It just depends on how you're teaching that traditional curriculum. We should we should do a little we should do a checklist for law students who are applying to law school and the kinds of things they might want to think about asking. I think that would be a useful thing for us to put out into the world.
Definitely. I think probably the word as much information as prospective law students have, I just think probably the current changes in the profession and what they mean for your school selections has not reached the people that need it the most. And I don't know that there is even sort of like you're saying a checklist for what you should be thinking about in the AI era as you go to law school. So we should definitely do that. And we maybe we should do a whole other episode too, thinking about some of these things. We only have a couple minutes left, but I'm wondering what changes you would make if you could wave a magic wand and transform legal education. What do you think that the law school should be doing right now?
So with full understanding that the law schools don't have, unlimited or unfettered, freedom to just do whatever they want because the accreditor requires them to do an awful lot of specific things. So this is not a critique of any law school that's not doing this, but you've heard me say this even before generative AI came on the scene. But I think generative AI makes it even more exciting. Is I would have law students before they sat in a classroom and read appellate cases spend the first few weeks in state courtrooms where people are trying to manage their justice problems, most of whom are managing them without lawyers because most people in the U.S. can't afford lawyers. So when they started studying the law, they understood that there was an enormous set of challenges that we need their creativity and big ideas to fix. I really think we could point creative law students before we beat the creativity out of them in law school at some of the biggest challenges in the profession. And I now think that this technology just gives them new tools to think about how to solve those problems. And it excites me to think about giving incoming law students the power to use those tools and the information about what they might, use them for, that I think could really change some of the biggest problems in the profession. So I think it would be like a really exciting time to be a creative dean that could figure out how to do all the things that the accreditor makes you do. I understand that, but also point talented law students with these really powerful tools at some of the biggest problems in legal education. Do you know Anna Carpenter, who's now the dean at Oklahoma? Do you know?
Yes.
Yeah,
She does not know me. I know of her because I
yeah,
followed her when I was in law student professional development world
yeah.
frequently.
She's amazing, and I want to catch up with Anna and see what she's thinking about in this interesting moment because she's always doing some pretty innovative things around access to justice, and I'm sure she's like thinking about what's possible right now. So and Andy Perlman as well, and there are definitely deans out there for whom this is going to be a really interesting moment. So yeah, I think we could have a lot more
Totally.
conversation about this if we want to take it up again in another episode.
Yeah, I think we should do that. There's so much to dig into here. And we can learn a little bit more about some of the work that you're doing at the AAA too, to partner with Suffolk and others right now to drive change in legal education. So we'll leave this here for now, but I do think there are other topics we could explore on a future episode, maybe after we've caught up with some of our favorite creative deans, and offer some helpful guidance for other deans trying to drive change. Not easy at all. So want to make it clear that we understand that as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Future episode. Tune back in.